So I think that everybody has the right to aggress back when unjustly aggressed upon. That's going to encompass like your right to self-defense, your right to self-determination. If somebody unjustly aggresses you, you should be allowed to defend yourself. I think that also applies to governing entities like the Israeli government. I think that because they were unjustly aggressed upon on October 7th and countless times prior to that, they should have the right to defend themselves against that aggression. That seems to be pretty unending.
Oh, you moved to slightly agree. Okay. What caused you to move to slightly agree?
Clarification on terms.
Where are we today, son?
We are at UCLA.
And we've just met?
We have just met.
And hello, sir. How are you?
Doing great. It's a fantastic day.
Have you ever played this game before yourself as a participant?
I've never been a participant, but I've facilitated one before.
Okay, excellent. So today we're going to do the claim, the Israel-Gaza war is a just war. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move. If he provides arguments that persuade you, would you be willing to move to the slightly agree?
Yes, I'm on neutral now, and I'm open to moving based on what I hear today.
Okay. Do you know a lot about the conflict?
Yeah, I'd say I know a fair bit.
Do you know, or would you know enough at some point to go to the strongly disagree and represent the other side fairly? Because we have nobody here to do that.
I mean, I know the arguments. Yeah, I think I could fairly well represent kind of what they generally argue.
Okay. Okay. So tell him now, what is your best reason for believing that it is a just war? Tell him.
Yeah, I think that if you analyze the historical context of the conflict, I think that generally throughout history, Israel has always been in the right. And then specifically with this conflict, you had over 1,000 people killed on October 7th and over 250 hostages taken by Hamas back into Gaza. And I think that warrants a military response by a sovereign country when its people are taken from it violently. And also, I watched the 47-minute October 7th classified cut. Gruesome. Like, we're talking like they clearly not military targets that Hamas, the Qassam Brigaders in uniforms, attacked. They broke into people's houses. They killed mothers, children, and fathers. After they were dead, they would like dump their magazines into their corpses. It just further reinforces the absolute and sheer brutality that these people carried out on civilians, non-military targets. I saw body camera footage from IDF soldiers of the Nova Music Festival, just carpets of dead bodies mowed down by Hamas. You had hostages taken there as well. I saw a man who was killed in his own home, a civilian. I watched members of Hamas attempt to chop his head off with a garden hoe. I watched 2 children get hit with grenade shrapnel after Qassam Brigaders threw a grenade into the bomb shelter that they ran into when they heard gunshots. The whole family, the father and the 2 sons, had woken up in their underwear and ran out of their house into their bomb shelter because they had to act quickly. They heard gunshots. They knew the town was under attack. And just after they went in, before the door was closed, grenade goes in.
Okay, let me pause you for a second. So when he says, I just want to make sure, because I don't have any idea how much you know about this conflict. Like, when he says Hamas, do you know what he's talking about?
I think so, yeah.
What is he talking about?
Yeah, I would like Hamas to be defined and just be defined.
Okay. Could you please define Hamas first?
Yeah, so Hamas is going to be the Islamic resistance movement. It is the sole governing authority of the Gaza Strip. They were democratically elected to the majority of seats in the Palestinian Legislative Council in 2006. So they effectively function as the governing entity of the Gaza Strip. And they obviously also have a military wing that often carries out military activities dressed as civilians. They're a designated terrorist organization. And yeah, so.
Just is a tricky word. How would you define that?
I mean, justified. I don't know. Morally right. Correct.
Okay. Are you clear on Hamas and are you clear on justified or just?
I'm clear on Hamas. I'm not clear on just. Because it's based on morals.
So what would you need to hear from him so that you would understand how he's using the word just?
Whether it's based, like what it's based on. It sounded like it was morals.
Is it a moral thing for you? Or?
Yeah, I think it's a moral thing. I think that it would be justified morally. I believe in the non-aggression principle. I think that everybody has the right not to be unjustly aggressed upon. I think that that should also apply to governing entities. If a terrorist organization breaks into your country and kills over 1,000 people and takes 250 hostages, I think you have the right to take military action and reclaim those hostages.
So now I have a question for you. And just to be clear, when you said terrorist organization, if they were democratically elected, are they still considered a terrorist organization?
Yes. They carry out acts of terror against other countries. So yeah, I would say so.
Is that unambiguous? Is that clear? Would you like more clarification?
I'd probably try to dig deeper on the morality part, like what the morality is based on, like what's the foundation of the morality that you're using to determine if this is just.
So the non-aggression principle. So I think that everybody has the right to aggress back when unjustly aggressed upon. That's going to encompass like your right to self-defense, your right to self-determination. If somebody unjustly aggresses you, you should be allowed to defend yourself. I think that also applies to governing entities like the Israeli government. I think that because they were unjustly aggressed upon on October 7th and countless times prior to that, they should have the right to defend themselves against that aggression. That seems to be pretty unending.
Oh, you moved to slightly agree. Okay. What caused you to move to slightly agree?
Clarification on terms.
Specifically what?
If that's what we're using as a basis for morality and using that to determine what is just and using the definitions Cam provided for terrorist organization, then that's what's causing me to move. I have more questions.
Questions about what specifically?
Well, one question would be, have we ever found a similar situation and a war because of it and it not be a just war?
So clarify that. What do you mean?
Yeah, has there ever been a war that is not just using the same justifications?
Do you mean in terms of like there's a terrorist attack and then the country defend itself, or do you mean just in generally, like has there ever been an unjust war based on the non-aggression principle?
Using these justifications.
With the same circumstances or different circumstances?
Similar
circumstances. I mean, possibly. I'm not exactly sure. I think that a really similar situation was 9/11. And the invasion of Afghanistan following 9/11, mass terrorist attack, thousands of people dead, and then we invaded the country responsible and tried to root out a terrorist organization that was there. I think that war was justified. There could be maybe an example of a war that wasn't justified based on that, but I'm not entirely sure. I mean, maybe like, Nazi Germany might have made the claim that Jews were terrorists and they were controlling their banks and doing bad things to Germans, and then they committed a Holocaust. Perhaps that could be like Hitler maybe could use the same justification. I'm not sure that he did or would, but I guess you could sort of esoterically argue that. I would just disagree on the cause, right? I don't think that a conspiracy theory on Jews controlling money and power is justification for a war, whereas I do think that a terrorist incursion into a country that results in thousands of people dead and hostages taken is cause for a retaliation.
What made you move back to the neutral?
Because a lack of an example of a war that is not just using the same criteria.
And it doesn't strike you as an unfair burden to ask somebody, because he's talking about a specific example. He's not talking about, I assume he's not talking about global history. He's talking about one specific example in this case.
If we could come up with an example, then I would maybe move or not move, depending on...
He's talking about a specific thing, and you're talking about global history. Does that seem to be an unfair burden on someone who's... Are you a historian?
No, I don't think...
Just yes or no, are you a historian? He's not a historian.
You're saying that it's unfair to ask for a specific example of an unjust war used by justified by the same reasons?
To a non-historian? Or is that...
No, I don't think it's unfair.
Can you think of that example?
He's on strongly agree.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. So flesh that out.
I think if somebody's on strongly agree or strongly disagree about something, I think it's fair to ask them to provide ways of knowing how they could be wrong.
And if you were only on the agree, you would think that's unreasonable.
I think it would affect how fair of a question it would be, maybe.
What is the best criteria to judge the justness of wars?
The best criteria to, I think, the act that sparks them. And I think also just based on like the general moral code, like I don't want to, I said I can't think of one, but I didn't want to wipe it off the table just in case somebody could provide a better counterexample. However, I think in general with similar circumstances and using the non-aggression principle, in my view, pretty much every war in that similar circumstance would be justified. Like I provided the 9/11 example. Because there was a terrorist attack by a foreign entity, the United States was justified in invading that entity and rooting them out. I can't think of any situation where an attack on a country from a foreign entity would not result in justified retaliation. And that's I think that's less so me not being able to think of an example and more so of the consistency of what I believe in. You know what I mean? Because most examples I would probably just believe they're justified.
What do you think is the best criteria to judge the justness of wars?
I'd have to think about that more.
So if you were going to rank criteria, for example, civilians killed, non-aggression principle violated, civilians kidnapped, you've been invaded, whatever, how would you rank order those?
What do you mean?
Like, in terms of what makes a war just, an invasion, a bunch of shelling a city, smuggling in a nuclear weapon and detonating it in a major city, introducing a drug into the drinking water of a major metropolitan area that makes people sick, kidnapping people and bringing them over the border. Like, what is the best reason for a justified war?
Unfortunately, I think they're all bad reasons because I wouldn't want them to happen. But I think generally the potentiality for casualties is going to be the highest ranking one, and it'd go like actual casualties, potentiality for casualties, and then like maybe violations of contracts or treaties, and maybe like shelling above that, right? So
Okay.
if you're directly aggressing the country, the degree to which the aggression is like sort of subjective. So is shelling worse than breaking treaties? Like depends on the treaty. It depends on the degree of shelling. You know what I
So
mean?
the number of people murdered would be a primary indicator, the number of people murdered.
I mean, yeah, the more people killed, the more just the war is, I think. And especially when you have hostages involved, the issue is like killing people is probably worse than taking hostages. But in a situation where you have hostages, the pressure and the timeliness to get those hostages back is like paramount, because if you don't get them back quickly, they could die.
Does that resonate with you? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have any questions?
I think I understand, but I'm still here at neutral.
So let me ask you a question. How many people did you say Hamas murdered?
1,200. And I think an interesting, a good distinction to make too is like, there's a difference between casualties of war and casualties of an initial incident. So that initial incident is the unjust aggression where somebody does an unprovoked attack. Whereas like the current war going on is not like an unprovoked attack. They're casualties of war. There are people on both sides dying, unfortunately. Nobody wants civilians to die.
Sure.
But in wars, they do, unfortunately.
Okay, so let me ask you a question, if I may. So, and I'm not an expert on this by any means. So he gave the number 1,200. Let's just accept by fiat that it is 1,200. Would your opinion of what mat you stood on, would you be more likely to go to the left or the right if the number was significantly above 1,200 or significantly below? So if, for example, if the number was 2,400 or 10,000 or 100,000, would you be more likely to go to the left? And if the number was 240 or 24 or what have you, would you be more likely to go to the right?
So you're asking, does the amount of people killed affect how I think
To affect if the war is just, exactly, correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the amount of casualties affects how just a war is.
Let's do a new claim. The number of casualties affects whether or not a war is just. In other words, an increasing number of casualties makes the war more just, and a decreasing number of casualties makes the war less just.
In the initial attack or during?
In the initial attack.
Okay.
You got it? Move. Okay, why do you slightly disagree?
I'm not convinced that
Tell him.
the justness of a war is based on casualties.
Even if oh, he moved. Why did you move?
Yeah, I think my brain wired me to go straight to strongly degree because of the last time. But the interesting thing is I think that the war is, if anyone dies in an attack, any number of people die in an attack by a foreign entity, I'm going to think that the war is justified. But I could see myself viewing it as more justified the more people are killed. But I couldn't see it getting any less. Like, so if less people were killed, I couldn't see myself moving further over here.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So the Canadian government is upset that Trump gets elected again, and they decided to lob a missile in Minnesota.
Yep.
And they kill a bunch. They kill a bunch of people. They kill 3 people. Mm-hmm. Is that a sufficient justification for war against Canada?
Yes. Invade them immediately. Their government has willfully, consensually, and in a premeditated fashion launched a missile into a United state and killed people. I would say even if the missile didn't kill anybody, that's cause for retaliation, because this is a similar situation that Israel's in. Is you don't know if they're going to launch another missile, and you don't know how many people are going to die from that missile, and you don't know if plenty more missiles are going to come over. I think it's an interesting analogy to sort of put this into perspective for people. Is if you're in a house and that house has shielding, so like if somebody shoots at it, the bullet's not always going to come through the house, but somebody's just like constantly like firing into your house, and you have a red button that will kill them immediately, but it will start a war or something, right? Would you press that button? Let's say all your kids are in the house. You have 10 kids. They're all in the house. Not all the bullets are making it into the house, but every bullet has the potential to kill somebody. Do you press the button and start a war? Hell yeah, you do.
Okay. So first, you move. I'm going to ask you why you moved, but Canada launches a missile. Trudeau launches a missile. He's pissed off that Trump was president. He kills 4 people in Minnesota. Is that justification for a war?
I wouldn't, just from that information, I'd say no right now.
What if he launched it on Chicago and he kills 50,000 people? Is that justification for a war?
I wouldn't say that would be the only criteria. Like, we have an example here where...
Okay, but hold on one second, because I'm trying to understand your reasoning for why you think the number of people killed doesn't increase the justness of the war.
It could increase the justness of the war, but I'm saying that it's not the best criteria.
What is the best criteria?
I don't know.
All right, let me ask you a question. What if instead of launching a missile in Minnesota, they take 20 people and they mutilate them in the public square in Toronto, and they put American flags over them? Is that an example of what you mean by when you say the number of casualties may not be the worst thing? Like if there's some kind of an atrocity, like something just ghastly, is that what you mean? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to figure out what you mean.
It could be the grotesqueness of the actions that would raise the justification for it. But I don't think the amount of casualties is necessarily the best criteria to...
Why did you move to disagree for... why did you move?
Because of what Cam said about the Minnesota example.
What specifically?
4 people. Right?
4.
That was the example.
F-O-U-R, yes.
Yeah, so an example of when a low amount of casualties could be just as justified as 4,000. So it's not about the amount of casualties, right? If that's the case, if you would still launch a war based on 4 casualties, so it sounds like it's not about the amount of casualties.
I'm sorry.
that's why I moved down.
Okay. I'm still trying to figure this out. So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. Help me understand this. So, if Trudeau, so it wasn't just a rogue general in Canada, it was Trudeau. He just starts launching missiles in the United States. Let's say he hits carpet bombs 8 of our cities. Is that a sufficient reason to go to war with Canada?
Probably, but not because of the amount of casualties.
Oh, okay. Then what? Because of what?
Well, say he carpet bombed places that were not as populated. That could still be the same amount of justification to defend ourselves.
So if he carpet bombed the desert, you'd be okay with it?
No.
So the casualties have to have something to do with it.
Yeah, it could influence the amount of justification for war, but I don't think that that's the best or
Okay.
the only criteria.
So in the case we were talking about 1,200 people, is the reason that you were on neutral is because those casualty figures weren't higher?
No, I'm saying that it doesn't necessarily have to do with the number of casualties.
Okay. Intention matters when considering the justice of war. Intention matters when considering the justness of war. Move. Oh, interesting. You both agree. Why do you agree?
I agree because I think, like, for example, if there's a situation where like the war would otherwise be justified, but you go to war not because you feel vigorously about some attack that happened, but rather to kill people or to get rid of a certain group of people, then for sure I would think that that's unjustified because your intentions are clearly not good ones.
Is that the reason you had?
No, I had
there?
a much simpler reason.
What's that?
It does matter. Even if it mattered, 0.1%, it would still matter.
Okay, go back to the neutral, please. Self-defense is a more just reason to go to war than to intentionally commit genocide. Move. Tell him why you strongly agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think committing genocide is bad. Obviously, I think everybody thinks that.
I would hope so.
And I think that self-defense is generally going to be the primary justifier for wars. Like, I don't think that we should go to war over like trade tariffs or anything. It's generally going to be self-defense. You know what I mean?
Why are you neutral?
Because I haven't had enough time to think about it.
That's totally fair. That's totally honest. So back to the Gaza thing. Do you think you know the position well enough to steelman it and go to the other side?
I just want to clarify the question.
Sure.
Is it which is a better reason to go to war if somebody's trying to commit genocide against you or if you need to defend yourself, or is it self-defense is a better reason to go to war than if you want to like commit genocide against somebody else? The second one? Okay. Well, the thing is, I don't think they want to commit genocide against Jews. Hamas does, and I can cite specific examples of them like stating that they want to commit genocide against Jews, so I could sort of show that. But I don't know that anybody in the West would necessarily agree with like.
You think they just want to like cage and torture them and not just kill them?
I think that they, like the pro-Palestine people, they don't think that Hamas wants to commit a genocide. They think they're a resistance group, but they're not. I mean, they are sort of.
Why do they discriminate against Jews and not let them go on camp? Like, why? If it truly wasn't about it, then why would they do that?
Like discriminate against Jews in Gaza, or?
Oh, you moved. Did you just move? You just moved 3.
I just understood the claim, I think.
Okay. Excuse me.
Sorry, I didn't.
Sorry. Yeah. That was
okay.
a radical shift that you just.
Because I thought the genocide part was to prevent genocide or to defend yourself against genocide, not to be the one committing genocide as a reason.
Yeah. It's the morality of Hamas versus the morality of Israel.
So I strongly agree that self-defense is a more just reason to go to war than for my side to commit genocide. Yeah. I think I understand now, and that's why I'm here.
Okay. Do you think you know enough about the situation to steel man the other side?
Yeah.
Would you mind? Are you comfortable doing that? Okay. So can you could you go back to the original one? Yeah. For your neutral. Yeah. So now I know you don't believe this, to be crystal clear, but you're gonna be a good sport about this and steel man this and tell us, now this is gonna be very difficult, but your goal is to do the best job you can and be clear, give what they call a hermeneutic of charity, a charitable interpretation to their reasons.
Right.
And we're going to see if those reasons are influential or persuasive. So tell him.
So I think the primary arguments they make against the war being just is that 40,000 people have been killed in Gaza by the Israeli government. They are constantly shelling it. I think they make the claim that like 70% of the buildings in Gaza have been destroyed. They're not allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza. People are starving. People are dying. Not bad. So yeah, I think it's more sort of the empathetic approach that they make in essentially just relating to empathy. Like people are dying. People are starving. Houses are being destroyed.
So there are 40,000 people who are routinely killed by the Israelis. Allegedly. So what's 1,200?
What's 1,200 compared to that 40,000?
Yeah, is that the reasoning?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, so the reason
like
that's
40,000 is much larger than 1,200.
Yeah,
yeah. So it is much larger than 1,200 if it were true, which I don't believe it is.
But let's just accept by fiat that
Sure,
that number
sure.
is correct.
If we accept the Hamas numbers, the difference is an initial act of aggression versus an ongoing war in retaliation to initial aggression. So if you initially, unjustly, unprovoked, aggress another foreign entity and kill 1,200 people, I think that justifies a military retaliation in a war. I think people unfortunately die in wars, civilians on both sides. There's not a single armed conflict in human history, probably where civilians haven't been killed, especially in modern history, more mass casualties due to larger munitions, stray fire, things like that.
And so their idea is that the Israelis have been doing this all along and they're just retaliating. And they just retaliated with 1,200, which is like chump change.
Yeah, well, their argument is for prior to the war isn't that Israel's been killing 40,000 people because that's only the death toll since October 7th. Their argument is rather Israel is a white colonial state made by European oppressors. They moved in, they took the land from all of the Palestinians, and then they moved them to the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and are oppressing them.
Okay. Not did you agree with anything he said, but did you understand what he said?
I believe so.
Do you have any questions with him for him to clarify the arguments? Not agree or disagree, but to clarify anything he said.
No, I think I got it.
Okay. Is anything he said sufficient to move you to the slightly disagree?
Not yet.
What would you need to hear? What evidence or reason would he need to furnish you with before you would move one Matt to the slightly disagree?
I don't know yet.
That's fair. That's always a good answer. Go back to the neutral real quick. Last question. Israel is morally justified to kill civilians in Gaza in certain circumstances. Move. Why you slightly agree?
Because I could probably come up with certain circumstances where it'd be morally justified to kill anyone.
Well, then why aren't you on agree?
Because I think it would take certain circumstances.
Extraordinary circumstances?
That might be a good word to use. Yeah. It would take extraordinary circumstances to be justified to kill anyone.
Like self-defense.
Yeah. Self-defense. Or defending someone else.
I was going to say, yeah, that was the other one I was thinking.
I guess the reasons that our laws are set up in ways where it's justified to take someone's life in certain circumstances, but they'd have to be extraordinary enough.
Tell him.
They'd have to be extraordinary enough to justify it.
All right. Why you on strongly agree to Israel's morally justified to kill Gazan civilians in certain circumstances?
Yeah, so I obviously don't want civilians to die. Of
course.
I want to minimize civilian deaths. The war isn't against civilians, but what it is against is a terrorist organization, Hamas, who hides among civilians and presents themselves as civilians. So it's less that I think Israel is justified to kill civilians and more that I think Israel is justified to strike Hamas, even if it means civilians may die.
Okay. So I just want to be crystal clear about this. He drove down with us today, so we know him. We've never seen you before. And you are a reporter, right?
Yeah.
And could you just really quickly tell us, you said like in the encampments here, there are things, don't talk to reporters, don't even talk to other people. Because we're having one heck of a time getting people to talk to us about any of this stuff, like literally any of it. Could you tell us real quick your experience, like they don't want to talk, or why is that?
Yeah, it's a posted rule, and it was inside the encampment that was up on Dixon Quad. It was a posted rule not to sow discord or distrust within the encampment. So don't talk to the people around you about the issue.
And it said that don't talk to.
Yes, and it also said don't speak to the media. So there are designated media liaisons inside the encampment that will not speak to. The media liaisons are meant to speak to reporters, whereas everybody else is specifically instructed to never speak to press.
We can find a media liaison and put him on the line?
But they might not talk to you. They won't talk to me. Specifically, they say they're against hostile media. So you might get like the ABC 7 guys might get a minute with him, but they're very unlikely to talk to anybody who's slightly conservative or may even slightly challenge their beliefs. So it's unlikely.
Well, this game challenges people's beliefs.
Yeah, so I doubt it. They probably won't speak to you. They probably won't play the game.
And you've tried to communicate with them?
Several of them, yeah. Usually what happens is I'll go up to their desk or whatever, or wherever they're set up, because now they don't have a standing encampment, so they could be anywhere. I'll ask to speak to a liaison, depending on who it is working the liaison situation that day. Usually what will happen is they will approach me, look at me, somebody will come up and whisper in their ear and tell them not to talk to me, and they'll walk away. They know, I mean, at this point, they know pretty well who I am. So I only got one to speak to me one time. A Thursday in April, the first day the encampment was up, I kept jumping the fence into the encampment, and they were getting really mad. So I kind of negotiated, like, I'll leave if you talk to me. And then they sent a liaison out, finally, to speak to me. And yeah, so.
And have you ever emailed these people?
No.
So,
I'm on their, like, I've signed up for their, some of their email lists just because, like when I'm going undercover and stuff, I just want to keep in the loop with what they're doing.
well, if you want to go undercover, you shouldn't be in this video.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, I wear a full face covering. So.
Okay. Do you understand why we're having such a difficult time getting people to do this with us?
I mean, I know why, but I don't.
Tell us why.
Understand it. Because they're afraid of discord. You'll notice, like,
Of discord or discourse?
discourse. Yeah. I'm both. They're afraid to talk to people. They're afraid to have their opinions challenged. And it's probably because they can't defend them.
So if they can't defend them, how do they know they're true?
I don't think they do. Everybody I've talked to has been totally, like, just absolutely mindless. The only time I've actually managed to have, like, a good debate here, not including the ones that I've had online, but specifically on this campus, was up at Royce Hall. Somebody approached me while I was filming a documentary at the Daily Caller, and he started arguing with me, and he couldn't define a single term that he used. He called America a fascist imperial state, couldn't define fascism. Finally, he came back at me and said that fascism is when you oppress women while also defending Gaza, and forgot that a woman's testimony is worth half that of a man in Gaza. Women can't leave their house without permission of a male.
Too.
Yeah, exactly. Spousal rape. But he didn't know the death tolls. He had never heard of any studies related to the death tolls. So, yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate that.
Appreciate
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks, that was good. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. This falls under the umbrella of my nonprofit, National Progress Alliance. Your generous donations keep us going and help fuel content like this. We truly appreciate your support. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.